Now, with a mild form of the dengue hemorrhagic fever, you can experience these symptoms: a high fever. Okay, we got a match there. A rash over most of your body, which may subside after a couple days and then reappear. Okay, it looks like we have a match there. Severe headache, backache, or both. Again, a match. Pain behind your eyes. Again, a match. Severe joint and muscle pain. A match. Nausea and vomiting. Again, a match. Now, I really find it odd that what is being called the Gulf flu, what I call the blue flu, I just described to you the symptoms of dengue hemorrhagic fever, and they match these blue flu symptoms. Either that's one heck of a coincidence, or there's something that we don't know. There's some tie in here somewhere, but all I'm doing is reporting exactly what the symptoms are, and they match. And this is not the only one either. Dengue hemorrhagic fever, more severe forms of the disease usually begin the same way as a mild form of dengue fever and then become worse after several days. The dengue hemorrhagic fever, a more severe form of the disease than the initial fever, can cause signs and symptoms such as a significant damage to your blood and lymph vessels, a decrease in the number of blood cells that help your blood clot, that's called platelets, bleeding from the nose and mouth, bleeding under the skin, which gives an appearance of bruising, and then eventually death. Now, granted, only in one case that I reported yesterday that any of this happened, but everything up to this point has been the symptoms of the Gulf flu or the blue flu. Now, in the dengue shock syndrome, the most severe form of the disease, even worse than the hemorrhagic dengue fever, it can cause signs and symptoms plus the normal signs and symptoms plus severe abdominal pain. Now, that's something that's been reported with the flu. Frequent vomiting, again, that's a match. Disorientation, that's a match. Fluid, plasma, leaking from blood vessels. Well, I don't know if bleeding out the rectum is the same. It could be. I'm not a medical doctor. I was just an old EMT. Another sign, heavy bleeding. Okay, rectal bleeding might fit that. A sudden drop in blood pressure. In all reality, we saw in the symptoms where it was higher blood pressure. However, this sudden drop in blood pressure is talking about going into shock. And then, again, death. Now, let's move on to another mosquito-carried symptom with yellow fever. Again, I'm familiar with this. Now, I'm just going to move ahead really quick here. I want to get to our call-in. We've already had half an hour. I'll repeat the call-in number as soon as I'm done with this part. And I just wanted to finish this up so people who had listened to yesterday's show didn't feel like I left you hanging. Once the yellow fever virus enters into what they call the acute phase, you will probably experience these symptoms. Fever, there's a match. Headache, there's a match. Muscle aches, particularly in your back and knees, that's another match. Nausea, vomiting, or both, again a match. Loss of appetite, I believe that was a match. Dizziness, yes, that was a match because of those who had passed out and fainted. Red eyes, face, or tongue. Again, that was on one particular case, but to me, let's call that a partial match. All right, so these signs and symptoms usually improve and they're gone within a few days. But then it goes into a toxic phase of yellow fever. And again, please don't try to say that I claim that we've got dengue fever or yellow fever or any of the ones I'm going to mention after this, that these are the blue plague. I don't know. I'm just matching up symptoms. I find it really odd that all the symptoms are the same or very close to the same. In fact, the last virus I'm going to mention is almost perfectly the same. Anyway, the toxic phase of yellow fever will be yellowing of the skin. That's why they call it yellow fever, which is basically jaundice. Abdominal pain and vomiting, sometimes blood, vomiting blood. Decreased urination, bleeding from your nose, mouth, or eyes. Arrhythmias in your heart dysfunction, which that was one of the signs that was with the Gulf flu. liver and kidney failure, brain dysfunction, including delirium, seizures, and coma. Well, that's what happens when your body shuts down. And obviously, the toxic phase of yellow fever is fatal. All right, now here's the last one, and this is where I'm going to wrap it up. Make sure you check all this out. Most of this came from the Mayo Clinic out of their studies and their books. It's all backed up by them. I'm just repeating what they have. The last one is called Ebola and Marburg virus symptoms, and those names come from the two areas, Ebola, which was, I believe, the river in Africa where this virus was first known to have erupted, and Marburg, the German name, and it came out from somebody who apparently had traveled in Africa and went back to Marburg, something like that. Don't hold me to it, but Ebola and Marburg viruses live in one or more animal hosts, and humans can contract the viruses from infected animals. Now, in other words, it's animal and human transmitted. Okay? The initial transmission, the viruses can spread from person to person through contact with bodily fluids or contaminated needles. Now, that's not the only way, but that's the most common ways. Again, this is not mosquito-borne. This is not dengue fever. This might be a little bit closer to trying to explain, perhaps, what's going on in the Gulf. If it is, I'm going to be amazed that at the same time the symptoms that I'm just about to read match perfect, and that's what scares me. I don't know if somehow something that's emulating Ebola virus, or maybe it's nothing to do with Ebola virus at all, but the symptoms are the same, and this is the scary part. So whatever is going on in the Gulf, it's going to have the same type of results as Ebola, because all the symptoms are the same thing, and these are symptoms of your body shutting down, your body trying to react, whether it's chemicals from Corexit or whatever the heck that stuff is, because they won't let us know exactly what it is. I don't know. But go read all this, and you come to your own conclusions. But you'll have to admit one thing. The symptoms are scary because they're the same. Here we go. The symptoms of Ebola or the Marburg virus. Fever, perfect match. Severe headache, a match. Joint and muscle aches, a match. Chills, sore throat, weakness, again, matches. Over time, the symptoms become increasingly severe and may then include nausea and vomiting. Again, a match. Diarrhea, could be bloody. That's a match. Red eyes, raised rash, chest pain and cough, stomach pain, severe weight loss. Now, that's something that isn't mentioned that's a match, but I do remember from something I read that I don't have on one of the links, and I didn't get time to put it up. It did mention severe weight loss. I'll get that up as soon as I can find it. So to me, that's a match. Confusion, irritability, or aggression, a match. Massive hemorrhaging from many sites, including nose, mouth, rectum, eyes, and ears. Well, that's maybe perhaps a partial match, if not a full match. Now, Ebola and Marburg hemorrhagic fevers are, again, just like the others, difficult to diagnose because many of the early signs and symptoms resemble those of other infectious diseases such as malaria or typhoid. Okay, I'm not stating that what I just read you is what's going on in the Gulf, but I am going to state that it's kind of scary that the symptoms are the same. If we're not talking of the same thing, if it's not the same, if we're not talking about one of these viruses, then we're talking about something that is just as bad. Now, if everybody wants to keep their head in the sand and just pretend that this isn't going on, that's fine. But I'll tell you what, there are people living along the Gulf Coast. They're on blogs. These are shrimpers and fishermen, second, third generation, who have been working for BP under the Vessels Opportunity Program and cleanup workers on a beach, and people who live in their condos and their houses close to the coast, everywhere from Mississippi to Louisiana, Alabama, and Florida, especially the panhandle of Florida, you can't turn around and say that these people are not having these symptoms because they're the ones who said in these different articles that they have the symptoms. Now, I'm not the one saying that it's a virus, but I can't deny the fact that the symptoms people have reported firsthand and have been reported not only on the internet but in smaller town newspapers along the Gulf Coast. And I read those symptoms to you last night on the premiere show. You can't deny that those symptoms do match what I just read about these viruses. So whatever is going on here, we need to find out. Just for the fact that if these symptoms mimic those kind of deadly viruses, then we need to find the cause of these symptoms. Whether it's a virus or not doesn't matter. We have to find the cause. We're going to lose a lot of people. Those who are sick now where these symptoms won't go away, as far as I'm concerned, they're going to die. And we can't cover this up. All of us have to keep digging and find some truth about this. We have got to get to the bottom of it. We don't have a choice. Again, a match. Severe joint and muscle pain, a match. Nausea and vomiting, again, a match. Now, I really find it odd that what is being called the Gulf flu, what I call the blue flu, I just described to you the symptoms of dengue hemorrhagic fever, and they match these blue flu symptoms. Either that's one heck of a coincidence or there's something that we don't know. There's some tie in here somewhere, but all I'm doing is reporting exactly what the symptoms are, and they match. And this is not the only one either. Dengue hemorrhagic fever, more severe forms of disease usually begin the same way as a mild form of dengue fever. Now, with a mild form of the dengue hemorrhagic fever, you can experience these symptoms: a high fever. Okay, we got a match there. A rash over most of your body, which may subside after a couple days and then reappear. Okay, it looks like we have a match there. Severe headache, backache, or both. Again, a match. Pain behind your eye, which gives an appearance of bruising and then eventually death. Now, granted, only in one case that I reported yesterday that any of this happened, but everything up to this point has been the symptoms of the Gulf flu or the blue flu. Now, in the dengue shock syndrome, the most severe form, it then become worse after several days. The dengue hemorrhagic fever, a more severe form of the disease than the initial fever, can cause signs and symptoms, such as a significant damage to your blood and lymph vessels, a decrease in the number of blood cells that help your blood clot, that's called platelets, bleeding from the nose and mouth, bleeding under the skin,